There is a kind of love that is not born from the soul, but from a wound. It looks like empathy. It looks like compassion. It looks like the soft hands of a healer reaching into another's pain. But underneath it, hidden even from the one offering it, there is terror. There is survival. There is the silent, unspoken plea, saying, "If I can heal you, maybe I will be safe. If I can love you enough, maybe I will be loved." Carl Gustav Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and pioneer of analytical psychology, was profoundly interested in both the mind and the soul. He devoted his life to exploring the hidden forces that shape human behavior, the unconscious realms where survival, love, identity, and destiny are written long before we are aware of them. He once warned us, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And sometimes, the greatest disguise we wear is the one that calls itself good. This is not a condemnation of empaths. Real empathy is sacred. Real sensitivity is a gift. But when the mask of the empath is worn to escape the abandoned parts of ourselves, when our tenderness becomes a survival mechanism instead of a soul offering, we are not healing the world. We are reenacting the tragedy of our own unloved childhood. Buried beneath that tenderness, beyond the mask of goodness, there is a forbidden room, and it has been waiting for you. Sometimes, what we call empathy is not born from true soul connection, but from something far more painful: emotional codependency, the invisible pattern where you abandon yourself in the desperate hope of earning love that always seems just out of reach. In the world of psychology, codependency describes the silent agreement where your worth is traded for belonging, where rescuing others becomes your price of admission into their hearts. This journey is not about shaming your softness. It is about awakening to your truth, because buried beneath the need to save, fix, and merge is the self you left behind long ago. The self, as Jung called it, is the original wholeness you were born with. The sacred center that existed before the world asked you to become smaller. The one who never needed to be needed to deserve love. The one who never had to bleed out to prove their worth. Today, we begin the descent into the real reason why your heart bleeds so easily, why you carry the broken pieces of others so willingly, and why healing must begin with the one person you abandoned first, yourself. By the end of this video, you will no longer confuse codependent survival patterns with your soul's true gifts. You will understand the difference between a love that sets you free and a love that chains you to your past. And if you dare to stay with me until the end, you may just find the key to becoming whole. Are you ready to stop calling your wounds your virtues? Are you ready to call yourself back from exile? Then let's begin. Carl Jung taught us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And so many who walk through life carrying the burdens of others are not following the call of their soul. They are reenacting the conditions of their survival. You were not born over-attuned to the needs of others. You were trained into it. You were trained by the invisible rules of homes where love was conditional, where danger lurked in the silence, where safety depended on predicting the emotional weather of those you depended on. There was a time when your sensitivity was not a spiritual gift. It was your armor. Maybe you were the child who knew how to read a parent's face before the first word was spoken. Maybe you learned to shrink yourself before anger erupted. Maybe you learned to be endlessly good, endlessly needed, endlessly available, because invisibility or usefulness were the only currencies you had to buy love, not because you were naturally born to save others, but because you were terrified not to. Stay with me. This is not an attack on your tenderness. This is the beginning of its liberation. Because Jung knew we all wear something called the persona, the carefully crafted mask we present to the world not who we truly are, but who we must appear to be in order to survive. The persona is not evil. It is the soul's desperate prayer for safety, shaped by fear, woven by necessity. The tragedy is not that you created a mask. The tragedy is that you forgot it was a mask at all. And when we cling too tightly to the persona of the healer, the rescuer, the good one, we unknowingly drift deeper into the arms of codependency, a slow erosion of the self disguised as compassion. You began to believe that being endlessly attuned to others was your gift, when it was your protection. You began to believe that losing yourself for others was love, when it was abandonment. But buried beneath the shining mask of goodness, Jung said, waits something far more dangerous and far more holy: the shadow. The shadow, in Jung's words, is the sum of everything within us that we refuse to see, all the instincts, desires, needs, and emotions we rejected to survive in a world that could not hold them. It waits not to destroy you, but to call you home, because the parts of you silenced, the anger, the selfishness, the sadness, the wildness, were not erased. They were buried alive. They fester, they haunt, they wait, and if you do not meet them consciously, they will erupt unconsciously, through resentment, through collapse, through the slow erosion of your soul, through codependent relationships that mirror back your invisible hunger to be chosen, to be needed, to finally be enough. Soon, we will walk into that hidden room together, the place where the abandoned parts of you still wait, fierce and wounded. But before we go there, you must understand the architecture of the trap, the roles you took on to survive: the rescuer, the martyr, the savior. These are not simply habits. They are what Jung called archetypes. An archetype is a universal pattern, a living symbol within the collective human psyche, ancient and powerful, shaping our behaviors before we even know it. You did not choose these roles freely. They chose you. They were carved into your bones by the places where love was withheld, by the storms you could not control. They whispered that being needed was safer than being seen. They taught you that to deserve love, you must disappear. And so you entered the ancient dance of codependency, the endless barter where you trade yourself for crumbs of belonging. Carl Jung said, "We all wear masks, and the time comes when we cannot remove them without removing some of our own skin. And the mask you wear is heavier than you think. You did not become the healer because you were born pure. You became the healer because it was safer to fix others than to face the shattered needs you were taught to silence. You did not become the martyr because you loved more. You became the martyr because your own longing was once punished. Your hunger for care, your ache for protection, your simple, sacred right to exist without earning it. You did not become the savior because you were stronger. You became the savior because being needed felt safer than being forgotten, because invisibility was a deeper wound than exhaustion. These are not flaws. These are survival songs your bones were forced to memorize. But survival is not the same as living. And every time you lose yourself trying to heal what you did not break, every time you sacrifice your breath to resurrect someone else's dying dream, every time you drown in another's chaos to avoid your own hunger, you are not practicing empathy. You are practicing abandonment. You are rehearsing the ancient and sacred tragedy of codependency, the slow, exquisite art of forgetting your own soul. And the shadow grows stronger beneath your smiles. The parts of you exiled do not vanish. They grow hungrier, angrier. They wait for the day you are too exhausted to keep pretending. If you do not turn toward them willingly, they will seize you violently, through breakdowns, through betrayals, through relationships that mirror every wound you refuse to name. Because what you do not face inside, you will be forced to face outside. And codependency, the silent marriage between your survival instincts and your forgotten self, will keep leading you into ruins over and over again until you awaken. But know this first. If you refuse to face the parts of you left behind, life will keep bringing you back to them. Through pain, through loss, through patterns that refuse to break. You are not here to bleed for the world. You are here to become whole. And no one else can do it for you. You are standing at the last threshold, the place where you stop abandoning yourself and start reclaiming your soul. Carl Jung whispered into the abyss, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Healing is not an ascent into light. Healing is a descent into the forbidden places inside you. Jung called the unconscious the great unseen world within us, the place where all that is rejected, forgotten, and unlived waits, shaping our fate behind the curtains of awareness. Imagine this. Your psyche is a house you built, room by room, from the first moments of your life. In every room, you place the parts of you that were acceptable, the politeness, the helpfulness, the selflessness. But there is one door you never open, one room sealed tight by shame and fear. Behind that door live the parts of you were taught to hate. Your rage, your neediness, your sadness, your hunger for life, your unwillingness to be small. These parts were never evil. They were inconvenient to those who could not love you fully. So you locked them away to survive. You locked them away, and you put on the smiling mask of the codependent caretaker, hoping that if you were soft enough, silent enough, small enough, you would finally be loved the way you longed for. But what is locked away does not disappear. It rots, it festers, it poisons the house from within. And if you do not walk into that room willingly, the rot will break down the walls you worked so hard to build. The unconscious demands to be seen. What you do not face internally, you will meet externally. Over and over, in the form of lovers who betray you, friends who drain you, patterns that break you, until you shatter or awaken. And here is the truth most cannot bear. Clinging to the identity of the empath often protects you from admitting that you are still living through the patterns of codependency, still terrified of your own need, still terrified of your own anger, still terrified of claiming your own life. It is easier to perform healing than to live it. It is easier to stay needed than to stay whole. But individuation, the word Jung used to name the sacred process of becoming who you truly are, beyond masks, beyond roles, beyond survival, demands the death of every false story you ever told yourself. Individuation is not becoming better. It is becoming whole. It demands that you stop running from the forbidden room. It demands that you sit in it, shake in it, rage in it, grieve in it, and then, at last, reclaim the parts of you left behind. Because the pieces you abandoned were never mistakes. They were your soul hidden in exile, waiting for your return. You do not simply walk into the forbidden room. You crawl, you bleed, you listen to the parts of you that scream about your betrayal, and you do not flinch. Most turn back at this threshold. Most run. Most numb themselves into oblivion. But if you stay, if you kneel there trembling but unyielding, something ancient begins to happen inside you. The abandoned self, wounded and furious, will whisper, "I never needed you to be perfect. I only needed you to come back." And the persona you clung to, the rescuer, the martyr, the savior, the codependent peacemaker, will begin to fall away like dead skin. You will see it clearly for the first time. You were never born to save the world. You were born to reclaim yourself. You were never meant to bleed for others. You were meant to overflow from the fullness of your own healed heart. Real empathy does not cost you your soul. Real empathy does not drown you in other people's oceans. Real empathy is the ability to witness pain and stay rooted in your own center. It is the courage to say, I see you, I honor your pain, but I will not lose myself trying to heal you. Because after you have reclaimed the exiled parts of yourself, you no longer confuse rescuing with loving. You no longer confuse sacrifice with devotion. You no longer confuse codependency with compassion. You finally understand what Jung meant when he said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. You have been dreaming long enough, dreaming that if you are kind enough, needed enough, selfless enough, you will be loved without condition. Dreaming that if you can heal enough brokenness around you, you will never have to face the brokenness within. But it is time to awaken. It is time to stop saving the world as a way to avoid saving yourself. Healing does not mean you will become endlessly good. Healing means you will become real. It means you will reclaim the fire of your anger, the depth of your sadness, the power of your hunger, the wildness of your soul. It means you will stop calling your abandonment love. It means you will stop calling your codependency compassion. It means you will stand naked in the truth of your being, even if it costs you admiration, even if it costs you relationships built on your silence, even if it costs you the false safety of your old life. And so you begin. You return to the forbidden room, not once, but again and again, until it is no longer forbidden. You sit with the parts of you that shake and rage and weep. You stop asking them to be easy or small. You let them tell you what they remember. You let them be seen. You let them belong. You make a home inside yourself for every piece you once banished to survive. Every time the old urge rises, the urge to save someone who must save themselves, you pause. You breathe. You ask yourself the question that will change everything. Am I abandoning myself right now to feel needed? If the answer is yes, you turn inward. You come home. You anchor yourself in the truth that you owe no one the abandonment of your own soul. You begin to dismantle the persona, layer by layer. You watch where you still perform, where you still hide, where you still beg for love by becoming less than you are. You tear it down not with violence, but with love. You peel back the false kindness, the false humility, the false strength, until what remains is something fierce, something raw, something holy in its imperfection. You commit yourself to the lifelong work of individuation, not to be better than others, but to be whole. You reclaim the child who was too much. You reclaim the warrior who was too angry. You reclaim the lover who was too needy. You reclaim the destroyer who was too dangerous. You reclaim the creator who was too wild. You reclaim the silence that holds your truth. You reclaim the storm that carries your fire. You reclaim every abandoned fragment and sew yourself back together with the thread of your own blood. And you remember, healing is not the absence of wounds. Healing is the sacred integration of every scar into your living, breathing truth. You are not broken because you needed to survive. You are powerful because you chose to awaken. But tell me, how long will you keep bleeding in the name of love that does not see you? How many more years will you trade your soul just to be needed? If these words have pierced you, if something inside you has stirred with the ancient knowing that it is time, then do not slip back into forgetting. Make this your rebellion. Make this your vow. Speak it out loud, even if your voice trembles. I choose to become whole. Declare it not for anyone else's approval. Declare it as a sacred contract with your own soul, the soul you abandoned when you thought being loved meant being less. Comment it, write it, shout it if you must. Let the vibration of that vow tear through the walls of every lie you ever had to tell yourself to survive. Like this video. Subscribe. Ring the bell. Not for me, not for numbers, but as a ritual to yourself. A reminder that you are not going back to sleep. You are not returning to the old dream of being good enough to be loved. You are not returning to the endless loop of rescuing others to avoid rescuing yourself. You are not the persona you built. You are not your wounds. You are not codependent. You are not a martyr. You are not anyone's savior. You are the soul you were always meant to become, and the world will have to meet you there, or not at all. The rest is in your hands. Will you choose yourself this time?